Pearson.
Good speech.
Thank you, Mr Deputy President. I rise to speak for the Animal Justice Party on the Kosciuszko Wild Horse Heritage Bill 2018. Though the Animal Justice Party supports the spirit of this bill and commend the government for taking action to seek to protect the wild horses in the Kosciuszko National Park, I have, however, some very, very serious concerns about what the bill fails to address and the necessary reassurances for animal well-being which must be secured in the bill. And to that point, the Animal Justice Party have proposed 2 amendments, but if those amendments are not agreed to, and the fact that the treatment of the horses in trapping, or luring, capturing, trapping, transporting to so-called riding schools or abattoirs, we will certainly not support that intervention with these animals. In history, the Brumby holds a special place in the Australian psyche, personifying the Australian courage and spirit of freedom. They hold a special and unique place in our history and have been immortalised in literature, film and songs. Today, just like many other introduced animals, and even our native kangaroo, they are considered by some to be feral pests, a deliberately loaded term that denotes these animals are below others and therefore can be treated in often cruel and inhumane ways. The Brumby has gallantly served humans, toiling on farms as stock animals, building the roads and railways we relied upon, even serving as police horses, enforcing the law of the bush. They accompanied men to war, with over 70,000 horses losing their lives in World War I alone, and none returned. We brought the horse here not out of love, but out of the notion that they would provide us with something useful. We exploited them, and then when they weren't needed, we disposed of them and sent them on their way into the wild bush. Wanted yesterday, unwanted today. They survived and adapted like any other being on this planet, and yet some continue to persecute them and advocate for the destruction of their existence. An often overlooked part of Australian history is how the local Indigenous people forged a strong connection with Brumbies after they were introduced. It has been stated by the Njaridjo and the Jirinjanj people had developed such an affinity with the animals they became, quote, horse whisperers, unquote. Njaridjo elder Ellen Mundy was recently quoted as saying, quote, even though horses were an introduced species, we still learnt how to communicate with them, unquote. The bill will in effect reset the whole approach to wild horse management. Some will say that this is not only unnecessary but detrimental to the ongoing preservation of Kosciuszko National Park. I am not of that belief. If they had taken the time to analyse the previous draft plan and associated reports, they would have seen that animal welfare was nothing more than a feel-good term utilised to endorse a mass slaughter of thousands or hundreds of individual beings. On further analysis, one can see the real dangers that were presented in that previous draft plan. We are of the opinion that some of the science and methodology behind that plan was either inadequate or overestimated. However, one thing is certain. That plan would have undoubtedly caused great suffering to animals. The previous plan proposed a mass reduction by way of slaughter to reduce an estimated population of 6,000 horses down to 600 within 20 years. Irrespective of any proposed humaneness, one must ask, would the wider community accept the needless killing of up to 6,000 healthy wild horses? In general terms, the process of killing any animal, in this case wild animals, without any justifiable reasoning, such as to euthanize a sick or injured dying animal, is not humane. Killing healthy, sentient beings, even if it can be done without wounding, terror or distress, is inherently, in the view of the Animal Justice Party, ethically and morally wrong. In October 2000, the slaughter of over 600 brumbies in the Guy Fawkes River National Park sparked widespread public outcry and national media attention. In response to this atrocity, an inquiry was conducted which revealed numerous failings of the National Parks and Wildlife Service in their role in this mass slaughter. Now let's look at population estimates. And in line with what the Honourable Mick Veitch has said, there has been much debate about the actual numbers of brumbies in the park. The estimate of 6,000 is generally supported. However, given the significance of the population estimate as one of the justifiable reasons for the slaughter, it seems that National Parks and Wildlife Service should be able to demonstrate confidence in these numbers, yet they can't. In fact, the very first key finding of this independent technical reference group report was, quote, that they had not been able to reach a conclusion on trends over time in horse numbers or densities in Kosciuszko National Park because of problems of comparability between successive horse surveys. Most concerning is the final resolution from the report regarding the question as to if horse numbers are on the increase. Section 2.2 of the report states, quote, in general, while there are indications from the various sources about that populations are increasing, the ITRG cannot at this stage draw rigorous scientific conclusions about how densities and rates of change vary across the park. These comments, documented with the ITRG report reveal serious flaws and a lack of confidence in both population numbers and population increases year on year. How the government can confidently release a draft plan which its main objective is to reduce wild numbers from 6,000 to 600 within 20 years on the best assumption without drawing rigorous scientific conclusions is startling. This shows serious failings of research, analysis, and any proper review. It implies a predetermined motivation of mass slaughter, regardless of the evidence or lack thereof, and that the objectives of that plan are unjustifiable and unnecessary. Let us look at environmental impacts. Conventional conservation thinking is largely centred on invasive biology and threats to native species, but this paradigm of thinking is changing around the world. Current invasive species biology disregards any benefits that introduced species bring to the environment. The research is more often than not designed to reach negative conclusions regarding introduced species and preserve native fauna at all costs. In so doing, inhumane consequences often result, as well as a failure to understand and recognise the positive effects on introduced species actually have on global biodiversity. Among the many research threads in compassionate conservation is a growing evidence that, in fact, much native flora and fauna do adapt to the introduction of other species, and in some instances actually help other species survive. This happens on across the spectrum of flora and fauna.
Like with foxes, cats.
Horses have been present in the mountains for over 200 years. Over this time, the horse has adapted to the mountain environment, and the environment has adapted to the horse. This process is known as ecological succession, quote unquote, which is the gradual process by which ecosystems change and develop over time. As tough and uncomfortable the current state of play is, we need to now grapple with the notion that some species are declining because they are simply not adaptive to change. Yet we punish successful species, inhumanely shoot horses and kill our top predators, disrupting their social networks and thwarting natural population controls. And what have we achieved thus far? Where has all the bloodshed got us? We have been trapping, shooting, capturing, and where has it got us? We have the same problem, if not worse, if it is a problem, than we had 100 years ago. The answer is that it has got us nowhere, this approach. We are and will be in the same, if not worse, situation if we continue to turn to killing as the answer. When animals are introduced into a new ecosystem, one of two things occur. They die without issue, or they breed and become naturalised. As soon as an ecosystem begins to support an introduced animal, the ecosystem also starts utilising the changes brought about by that animal. Nature is not set in stone and is not meant to remain the same as it was in 1769. With the introduction of the horses, other species begin to find niches in the disturbed soil and the collapsed stream beds created by heavy exotic herbivores. Plants begin utilising the nutrients in the large piles of manure. Plants and insects use the big bodies of horses for transportation to new niches around the landscape, maximising opportunities for the survival of their own species. A new biodiversity. Therefore, once a species is naturalised, once a species has found a niche in an ecosystem, it becomes impossible to remove them in large numbers without actually doing harm to that ecosystem, sometimes more harm than good. In a rapidly changing environment, as Australia has been for the last 200 years, the harm of removing a naturalised species is very likely to exceed any good. Now I finally come to fertility control as the solution. Fertility control has been successfully applied to wild horses, deer and zoo populations for over 2 decades. Beginning in 1996 with the application to elephants in Kruger Park, it is considered to be a more humane and often more effective form of wild animal management as compared to lethal methods. Despite a wealth of authoritative evidence on the efficacy of such methods, I am still very concerned that the government, even in their debate to this bill, have not or are not committing to a well-funded program of immunosterility and completely ruling out lethal control. Unlike killing, which simply provides niches for younger, more fertile individuals to fill, fertility control buys time. Older, infertile animals continue to hold their territory, while every other animal in the population can be rendered infertile. Unlike killing, fertility control as long as it is carried out using gentle and humane techniques, will involve no cruelty. And it works, it reduces the population over a period of time, and it keeps it controlled so that other animals will not move into that same area. For a sterilisation method to be considered suitable, a number of characteristics have been presented as prerequisites. Most notably, the vaccine must have an efficacy rate of 80 to 90%. It must require no surgical invasion, have a minimal impact upon animal behaviour, and it must be remotely applicable and not require direct handling of the targeted animal. And there is a porcine zona pellucida vaccine, or PZP, which has been used very effectively on both horses and deer, as well as elephants in Africa. So fertility control is the long-term solution. It is the humane solution. It is the solution to this problem that we've been facing for 250 years. It is for this reason that I will be moving amendments to the bill which require any future draft plan to explicitly utilise fertility control to manage wild horse numbers. This is the sensible balance. We at the Animal Justice Party believe in the principle of least harm. This is a principle where we, in the best way possible, grapple with all the complexities and external factors of an issue and determine what will cause the least harm to individual animals, whether introduced or not introduced, or native, or as the Indigenous people have said to me, when I've asked the question, when do you believe an animal is native? And the answer was, from a very from a wonderful elder, when it is born here. Isn't that what the word means? Nate, birth. Unfortunately, there will be always some harm, no matter what we do, but we can only try our best. The Animal Justice Party does not and never will support any method of lethal control. In addition, from any animal welfare standpoint, we do not support practices such as roping, chasing or brumbie running in any way, shape or form. With modern-day solutions and a sensible approach, there should be no killing of a healthy brumbie, nor should any brumbie, under any circumstances, be transported to any slaughterhouse. I would like to express my sincere gratitude to the numerous brumbie advocacy groups who, like most animal advocacy groups, work tirelessly to protect and defend and rescue individual brumbies. This bill, if anything, could be a step forward in actually bringing the issue of animal well-being and introduced animal management to a more sensible space for measured and fact-based debate. However, that step will only be supported by the Animal Justice Party if the amendments to strengthen the spirit of this bill are passed.